What's up guys, it's Seth and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to start a series on rendering and drawing textures. The first texture in our series, as you can see, is wood. So we're going to cover how to make like a wooden plank, and then we're going to do another one where we cover how to make like a wooden hardwood floor kind of layout, and that'll be more so for my scenic designers and people who make environments where you might need a large kind of swatch of wooden planks. So grab your iPads, open up Procreate, and let's get started. So we will be starting this tutorial today in a simple square canvas. I will put the dimensions on the screen so you can follow along with this exact size if you want to. And the color profile is sRGB. Alrighty, so we are in our canvas. The first thing we're going to do today is learn how to draw a wooden plank. So we're going to start by making a general shape of a plank that we can build up all our textures and effects on top of. So you can do this one of two ways. You can either draw the plank out, or you can use your selection tool to make the general shape. I think for today's purposes, we are going to just draw our shape and fill it with a color, and then that will be our base kind of shape to start working with. So go to our layers panel. We will be on layer 1 here. Next, we're going to go to our brush library and pick a simple brush. One of my favorite brushes to use when I'm just making general shapes is the monoline brush, and that is found in your calligraphy folder. So you just go to calligraphy and go to monoline, but you can use any brush you want. So we have monoline brush. We're going to just increase our size here a little bit. I'm just going to draw a general plank shape. So come down like that, and then we're going to kind of come this way a little bit. So this is going to be the short end of the plank, if that makes any sense. You'll see what I mean once I make the shape. Then from here, we're just kind of going to go up. It can have a little wave or a little something in there. Then we're going to come up like this, come straight up. Now from here, we're going to follow the same angle. So kind of make this line parallel, but you can still obviously have a little variation, a little wave in there. And we're going to stop it somewhere around here and just connect the line this way. Actually, let me redo that one more time. I'm just going to connect the line here, make it a little bit more straight. So this is the shape we're working with. It's kind of like a perspective on a long rectangle. You want to make sure all your areas here are closed. There's no gaps in your line art. So check all the corners, make sure they all connect. So now that you have this shape, we're just going to fill it with the same color. So just go to your color picker, whatever you were drawing with, take the color and just drag it in and drop it. And that should fill your shape with the color that you selected. So go ahead and just reposition that plank to the middle of your canvas. So make sure you have snapping turned on down here, and that will help you snap your image to the center. Cool, now we have our plank shape in the middle of our canvas. So the next thing I'm going to do here is actually turn my canvas, the background color, to not be white. So we're just going to make it gray. So come to your layers panel, tap background color here, and just drag it down to it's gray. So now we are in our layers panel. Let's go ahead and rename layer 1. So tap on layer 1, hit rename, and let's just name it wooden plank base, something like that. So now the next thing we want to do is change the base color. Obviously we do not want black to be the base color. So how we're going to do this is we're going to turn alpha lock on. You actually don't even need to, but just for this purpose I'm going to show you. So turn alpha lock on, just tap here, hit alpha lock, and now we can just drop a color or paint a color over this black here. So now we're going to go to our color picker here. We're going to find a really light cream color for our base color. So imagine like raw lumber when you go to Lowe's or something, you see that color, that's the kind of color we're going for. But yeah, so once you find a nice base color, and obviously you can pick whatever color you want, we're just gonna drag the color into here and drop it in. Great, so now we have this kind of cream, beigey color wooden plank that has no definition. It just looks like a rectangle in the middle of your canvas. So now we're gonna start adding some definition to the edges so we can start to really define the plank and see all of our sides. With alpha lock turned on, so once again, if you don't have alpha lock, just tap here, make sure alpha lock is checked. We're going to come to our color picker, And from that base color that you have, just drag down a little bit. It doesn't have to be anything too drastic right now. So just drag it down a little bit. And we're going to come to our brush panel and pick a different brush. I'm going to go to painting and pick the acrylic brush, or you can use the round brush, anything like that. And we're just going to start to define the edges of our plank here. Go ahead and adjust your size a little bit. And we're just going to start drawing in the edge here. So we're going to follow this plane down from this corner. So where we see our plank kind of change directions, we're going to start there and draw down this way, stopping here. And then once we get to here, it's going to go this way to this corner. And you can see my opacity is low because I kind of wanted to sketch in where it was going first before I committed, basically. So now that I have this shape, I can just fill in the rest of it. So we're going to make our brush a little larger, take our opacity up, and then just continue to kind of draw in the shadow on this edge, making sure to stop somewhere around where this corner is. Cool. And now that we have that, we're going to fill in this edge, but not with the same color. We're going to go a little lighter. So come to your color picker, drag it up a little bit, maybe somewhere in there. And we're going to fill in this side, making sure to stop here at the corner as well. It doesn't have to be perfect. As you can see, I kind of overlap the colors there. So here we can finally start to see our plank kind of taking shape here. I'm going to adjust this a little bit later. The shape is kind of funky, but so we're going to go back to this color and fill in here. We kind of make sure we have a sharp line at the corner here. So now that we have done that and defined the edges here, we can see the plank more clearly now. Obviously, this is the face of our wooden plank, and these are the sides. This side is the most in shadow, because if we're imagining maybe the light's just coming this way, this side's going to be the most in shadow. This is going to be a little bit in shadow, but not completely. And this is not in shadow at all. So yeah, so now we have our shape filled in, and as you can see, we check our layers. That was all done on one layer because we had alpha lock on, so that's perfect. I'm not really liking the shape of this wood. This little bend here is a little too wonky for me. So I'm going to go to my liquify tool and just kind of play with the shape here. So how you do that is you go to adjustments. So that's right here. Down here we have liquify. It's going to tell you alpha lock layer is selected. We can't use that filter on the alpha lock, so go ahead and open your layers and turn alpha lock off. So tap here, turn it off, and go back to liquify. Just going to adjust this size a little bit. We're just going to kind of nudge this back into a nice shape. And as you can see, liquify is just slowly kind of nudging and pulling the shape in the direction of your brush. It's really nice to come in with this and make edits after you make your shape. There we go. I like that better. So now we're going to come in and add some imperfections into like the edges of our plank here. So basically what we're going to do is use our selection tool and just draw in some jagged pieces, you know, where the wood may have split or something like that. We're going to draw that in on our edges here and just cut that out of our base shape. So once again, make sure we're on our base shape layer. That should be the only layer you have active right now. And on your canvas, we're going to come to selection here. Make sure you're on freehand. So we're basically going to come in and make some imperfections to the edge of our wood here. And swipe down with 3 fingers and hit cut. So you can see that just made the edge of this just have a little bit more imperfections like wood would have. And you're going to do the same thing on this side, but on the bottom, because we obviously still need the top to be there completely. So selection, freehand, and on the bottom of our plank here, we're just going to draw a little jagged, kind of let it do whatever it wants to do. We're going to loop it back around, tap to the end, swipe down with 3 fingers and hit cut. So as you can see, we just added a little bit of like jaggedness and imperfections to the end of the plank here as well. Alrighty, so now that we have that shape, what we're going to do next is to start adding in like some cracks and things and splits on the end of our planks as well. And we're just going to simply do that with hue, saturation, brightness and making a selection. So let's go ahead and do that now. So go back to your select tool here. We're going to go to freehand. And what we're going to do is kind of come to our end of our plank, and anywhere we're just going to draw a semi-jagged kind of line like this to about there. And then from here, we're going to follow that same line up, but make a V shape and make that whole selection. So once you make that selection, don't click out of it. Go ahead and go to your adjustments menu here. Tap hue, saturation, brightness, and we're just going to lower the brightness a bit. So I'll lower mine for about 10%, so it's at 40% right now. And go ahead and click out of that and click out of your selection. And when you zoom out, you can see we've made this kind of notch or split in the wood. And we'll build up a little bit of detail on that later on. So we're going to do the same thing on this edge, but because we're seeing this edge of the plank, we're actually going to see the split on this side as well, and then on this face as well. So go to your selection tool, make sure you're on freehand, and we're going to start down here. So just tap to make a start point, and then draw a pretty loose line straight up to this edge. And now we're going to follow the direction of the plank. So now we're going to go this direction, a little wobbly, nothing too specific. And then once we get to this point, we're going to come straight back the same direction, but make a little V. We're just making a small notch in the wood. And once you get to this face where it starts to go back down this direction, just follow that same direction down and connect your selection. Great, so once you have your selection, don't tap anything else, just hit adjustments, hue, saturation, brightness, and we're going to lower it 10% again like we did the other one. So just go to about 40%. Cool, once you have that, you should be able to zoom out and see. Now you have 2 sort of cracks forming in the end of your planks of wood. If you want a perfect plank of wood, you do not have to do this step, but I thought it'd be nice just to show you a little bit of variation and how you can achieve that look if that's what you're going for. Alrighty, so at this point we have our plank, we have the start of our cuts and breaks in the wood, and that's all on the base layer. So now we're going to start using this base layer to build up other effects on top. Alrighty, so in our layers panel, go ahead and hit the plus. We're going to add a new layer. We're going to clip this layer to the wooden plank base. So tap on it, hit clipping mask. So anything we draw on layer 2 will only show up on this first layer here. We're going to go to our brushes, and in our painting brushes, there's actually some really good brushes for wood already in here. So that's what we're going to start with. So we're going to start with our dry brush here. Once we select our dry brush, we're going to go to our color picker. We're going to take this color here and just drag it pretty much all the way down to black. You don't have to go full black, but pretty close. We're going to adjust the size of this. Let's start with 5% for now. Full opacity is fine. We're just going to start laying in some of the finer detail that's underneath. So slowly just kind of make strokes in the direction of the face of the wood. We're just going to go up and down, up and down. As you can see, I'm only on the face right now. We'll do the other sides later. And I'm just lightly going back and forth, pretty much in the same direction, not getting crazy with this. And this is creating a finer kind of bark detail that you see in lumber. Well, in some lumber, not all. Great, so now that we've added this kind of barky texture on the top of our plank, we're going to do it on the sides and on the edge here. So this is going to go in the same direction. And then on this edge, we're just going to go up. All right, we're going to call that good. I like how that looks. And make sure you're just naming your layers as you go. So if you want to come back and change something later, you can. So I'm just going to rename this Fine Bark. I don't think that's technically the term for it, but you know. Or maybe Fine Grain. So now we're going to add another layer on top. Tap here, tap clipping mask. So layer 3 is now clipped to the wooden plank as well. Go to your brushes here. I'm going to go to our old brush here, which should be directly above dry brush. Adjust our size a little bit. We're going to do the same exact thing. This brush has more of a drag to it, so you might have to be a little bit lighter with your touch initially. If you're finding that you just have a heavy hand, you can lower your opacity. That'll help you have a little bit more control on how much ink you're laying in. So yeah, just adding in a little bit more character to our plank here. And this looks pretty good. It's a little too strong, so I'm going to actually erase a little bit of it with the same exact brush. So just hold down on your eraser tool here. Long press, you should see erase with current brush pop up. But if you tap in here, you can see that it's selected the same brush we were painting with as the eraser. I'm going to lower my opacity about halfway and then kind of just come in here and clean up some spots where it got a little too heavy. We don't want to lose all that fine texture that we put in underneath, or that fine grain that we put at the bottom. So I'm just going to come in here and kind of clean up a few areas. Alrighty, so I like how that's looking. We're going to call this layer good, and then we're just going to rename it. Alrighty, so you guessed it, we're going to just keep building up like we've been doing. So we're going to add another layer, clip it. We're going to do a different brush for this one. So I think we're just going to go back to our wet acrylic or acrylic brush. It doesn't really matter. Lower the size a little bit. Now we're going to get more into like finer detailing. Right now we're going to start adding in like rings and knots and things like that. So if you want to pull up a reference image for this, feel free to. I've looked at enough pieces of wood to kind of generally understand how it goes, so I'm not going to do that today. But if you want to, feel free to. Here, start blocking in that shape. Kind of making like a circle with these parts that kind of jut out at the end. I'm just going to extend it out at the end like that. Let's do another one maybe over here. We'll just make that kind of oval shape. Slowly keep filling it in and kind of drag it off this side and this side. Yeah, so I'm liking how that's looking. And then from here, we're going to start doing some like more defined graining around our knots. So I'm just drawing the lines. drawing in these longer, more defined grain marks and rings and things like that in our plank. So I'm just making long strokes this way, building up little by little. And you can be as specific as you want to in this step. For the purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going to make a few more marks and we're going to call it good. And also, this is a nice time that if you have a reference image to really kind of zoom in and try to follow the reference image. Alright, I think we're going to call this step good. So now that we have this, it's going to look pretty stark and contrasty because we have this very light beige and then everything else is pretty much black. But fret not, we'll add color in on a different layer and it'll bring it all together. Actually, and while we're on this layer, I'm going to show you one more brush that actually helps you mimic wood pretty well here in Procreate. So this brush is actually in the inking category. And it's the, I can never say this word, thylacine, something like that. I think it's a cat. This brush right here. You can see it already has that kind of graining look to it. So we're going to use that to help us get a little bit more defined graining happening here as well. So we're on our knots layer. Let's use about 4% right now. Let's see what happens. Maybe a little larger. So we're going to slowly use this brush and kind of just add in some more defined grains. I have to lower our size a little bit so we can have a little bit more control over it. To me, this brush mimics like a comb tool. So if you're a scenic artist out there, you know what I'm talking about. It's a tool that we use to help us achieve wood graining, but it kind of mimics that. I would say add this in pretty sparingly. It's pretty strong and it can get strong very fast. So just here and there. You might not even need this texture on every piece of wood that you render, but I kind of just want to show you all the techniques that are possible right now in case you want to use them later. Great, we're going to call that good. Not too much, just a little bit here and there. Cool, so now that we have this, we're going to go to our layers panel, hit plus, clipping mask, and now we're going to add a little bit of color to our plank because now it looks like a bare piece of wood and we do not want that. So we're going to go to our color picker here. Pick, you know, I would say somewhere in this umber family. So a pretty standard brown. So once you have that color, go ahead and go to your brush library. And with the same acrylic brush, we're just gonna add in some color here. So I'm gonna raise my size, opacity, pretty high. I'm just gonna add this color in. And at this point, we're just trying to fill the whole plank with a little variation in color. Yeah, you could just drop this color into this layer as well, but you want to have some variation in this color. You could come in and pick, once you have that laid in, you can go lighter or darker and lay in some of that color as well, just to have a little variation. And then we can smudge it out. So you hit smudge, just hold down. So you can smudge with the same brush that you were painting with. You can kind of come in here and blur some of these colors together. Cool, so at this point, you should completely have covered your plank in this kind of brown, umbery color. And as you can see, that's on layer 5 here. So what we're gonna do now is adjust the blend mode on layer 5. so we can start to see that grain appear again, because obviously we want to see all the work we just did. We don't want to just cover it up with the brown. So tap on your in here, but I'm actually going to go to multiply, which is going to allow everything we just did underneath to show through. And this brown is like really strong, so we're just going to reduce the opacity a little bit on this layer. Not much, I'd say about 86. And yeah, I like how it looks. As you can see, now that we've added color, we've kind of lost that definition down here in the plank itself. So we're just going to kind of paint that back in on top. But before we do that, rename layer 5. Just go ahead and name it color. And we can actually just stay on our color layer here and just continue to paint in darker colors to just help bring the definition back here. So what we're going to do is, while we're on the color layer, go to our color picker. And this is the color we use. So we're just going to kind of go down into our umber territory, not black. With our acrylic brush, I'm just going to come in here and start laying in some darker tones back into the edge here to bring that back. And then the same thing on this side. I'm just going to reduce my opacity significantly for this side and just slowly bring definition back to the edge of our plank here. And remember, this side is going to be darker than this side, so just keep that in mind as you are doing this step. As you can see, like I said, I went back and kind of defined that edge a little bit with a darker, more intense and intentional line there. Now we're going to come in and find the cracks that we did earlier. And we're still in the same color layer. And with this dark color, we're going to find the cracks that we made earlier and just start to define those as well. We'll take our brush pretty small, keep our opacity pretty high, and just come in and start to darken the edge that would be in shadow. So this whole crack would be in shadow if the light is coming from this direction. The whole thing would pretty much be in shadow. So we're just going to come in and gently follow this crack, just defining it and making it pretty dark. So we're going to come to this side here. We're going to go back to our base plank here and go to our selection tool on freehand, and we're just going to cut out like the corner here, if that makes sense. So if we're looking at this plank from this direction, the cut would go down, but then we would see the face of the wood here. So then we're just going to follow that way and make this kind of little V shape. Connect it there, swipe down with 3 fingers, hit cut. So you can see what I mean now. So we've kind of notched out the wood, how it would actually look in real life. And since we cut that away from the base layer, everything else we put on top is still going to stay within this shape. So it comes to this side, selection tool, freehand, and this one is a little different because actually we would see most of this, but we're going to come in this way and then down. So still a little V notch, but just the opposite way. And you can see what I mean here. So now we kind of zoom out, we see like, oh, the wood is cracked there. So we're seeing it all the way until we hit this face here, and then we wouldn't see any more of the crack. So that's kind of what that's showing there. Yeah, this is looking good. I like it. So I'm actually going to darken this edge a little bit and kind of define it. Right now it's a little soft, so it looks like this wood maybe was routed or like had a sanded edge. So I'm just going to come in with a dark color again and kind of give a little bit more definition to the edge of this plank on this side. Now from this point, you can continue to make darker recesses. So you can come to the edges here and start to make more defined choices in your shadowing. All right, I think we're gonna call that step good. So next we're just gonna move on to adding highlights. All right, so to do highlights, we're gonna create a new layer. So hit plus. Go ahead and clip it down. And then we're just gonna select a lighter color that's on our wood. So somewhere up in here, it's a pretty light color. I have my eyedropper tool to be set up to just be my finger pressing down on the screen like this. But your eyedropper tool, if you haven't changed any settings in Procreate, is probably this little square mark here. So you hit that and that should bring up your color picker. But like I said, go ahead and just pick a pretty light color that's already on your wood right now. Then we're gonna go to our color picker up here and just drag that color straight up somewhere in there. So you can see like mine is like a pretty peachy orange right now. And with the same exact brush, so with our acrylic brush on layer 6, we're gonna just start drawing in highlights on the wood. So the highlights are gonna hit the corners, so it's gonna hit the edges, so it's gonna hit places like here, here. On our cracks, if we're imagining the light is coming from this direction here, so if we're imagining our light is coming kind of this direction, this edge all the way, it's gonna hit this side of the crack, here, and along this edge. And then any ridges on the wood where it's raised or lowered. So it's kind of arbitrary, but like just follow the general direction. And I don't think you have to be super specific as long as it's believable. So raise your brush size up a little bit. I'm at full opacity at this point. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm just gonna lower it a little bit. And yeah, we're just gonna start adding this in. Right now, it's not gonna look super intense, but we're gonna change the blend mode, which will make it really pop. So just kind of follow this edge. Anywhere where the light would hit. You probably do want a smaller brush for most of this step, just because the highlight is hitting in very specific points at this part. So paying close attention to our edges here. Slowly building up these very intentional and very strong highlights along ridges and along edges. So if you zoom out, you can start to see it really taking shape. That's why I say kind of stay zoomed out while you work, just so you don't get too caught up in the really, really fine details that won't read. So you can see our highlights really brought this piece of wood together. It looks super realistic. I mean, not super realistic. It's still a little bit stylized in a sense, but when you see it, you know that it's wood. So what we're gonna do now is change the blend mode of this layer. So we're gonna come to our layers panel. I'm gonna delete the arrow that I made earlier just so we don't confuse anybody. So all our highlights here should be on layer 6. Just tap the N here. And let's go for screen. Yeah, I like screen. Either screen or add. Whichever one looks better to you. They both look really good. I think screen looks a little bit more believable in this sense. So as you can see, it really made our highlights pop here. And now that we can see them a little bit more clearly, I think I'm gonna smudge a couple of these out just to make it blend a little bit better. So we're gonna hold our pin down on our smudge tool. So we're smudging with the same brush that we were painting with. Make sure your opacity is fairly low. And just slowly drag out the color. We don't want to blow out all our detail because then it'll start to look soft and almost like clay, if that makes sense. But we don't want that. We still want these defined edges and things. So in order to keep that definition, we don't want to lose all of the sharpness in the strokes that we just created by painting it all on. So yeah. I think the last thing we're going to do is add a little bit of the dry brush highlight into the graining, and then we'll call this good. Add one more layer on top and hit clipping mask. And with that same exact color, we're just going to keep that kind of peachy color. We're already in painting. We're just going to go back to our dry brush here and use that to make a few more of the really fine grain that we did. It's like one of the first steps we did. We're going to bring that back to the top, but in highlight form. Nice, nice. I like how this looks. You might not really be able to see it super clear right now, but once again, just go to your layers, tap the N, and we're also going to turn this to screen, and you should see them pop up. And that looks really, really good. I'm happy with this. So if you think that's too intense, you can always come here and just lower the opacity on it a little bit until it looks good to you. Alrighty, I think we're going to call that good. So this is how you render a plank of wood. Alrighty, so how we're going to start our floor full of wooden planks, we are going to actually turn on a drawing guide. So go ahead and go to your wrench icon here. This is your actions panel. If you're not already on Canvas, just tap Canvas up here. You should see drawing guide here. So go ahead and turn that ticker on. It's going to bring up like an arbitrary guide. So we're just going to edit it to make it work a little bit better for us. So go ahead and hit edit drawing guide. And now that we're here, it's going to bring up a bunch of options here at the bottom for us. We can change the opacity of the lines themselves so they're not as distracting. I would normally lower mine pretty low because I don't like to see them. You can change the thickness of your line. You can also change the grid size here. As you can see, there's a bunch of other guides that are in here, but for today we're just going to be on 2D grid. So go ahead and tap grid size here. Just tap where you see the pixels. It's going to bring up this menu, tap on inches, and just type in 0.50. So just 0.5 inches. It's going to make a grid mark every 0.5 inches on the canvas. Hit done, and now we have our 1/2 inch grid. And just hit done here. All right, so go to our layers panel, go ahead and hit your plus mark, and then we're going to go to our selection tool, and we're going to go to rectangular. So at this point, we're just going to make a square and try to make an equidistant square. So say if you're starting 3 grid marks in on this side and 3 grid marks down. So here, just match that on the other side. So we'll count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Cool. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it'll help later on. So once you make that square within a square, make sure we're on a new layer. It's going to be called layer 9, and we're just going to drop in any color at this point. So once you have your square, go ahead and click out your selection. And this is going to work exactly how the plank of wood worked earlier. So we're just going to use this shape to build up everything on top. This method is actually a little bit more straightforward. Since we're making a lot of planks, we're just going to do it all the texture at once. And then we're going to add the plank lines in last to help define each plank. But this actually goes a little bit faster than the plank of wood itself. So let's just get straight into it. We're going to change this base color because that's not going to work for us. So you can just turn on alpha lock. We're going to go here and kind of shoot for that same color we did in the beginning. So go very light beige. So imagine, once again, a piece of raw lumber that you would get from Home Depot or something like that. We're looking for that color. So once you find it, take it from your picker and just drag it over and drop it in. With alpha lock still on, we're going to turn on drawing assist on this layer. Since we have this grid up, when you tap here, you should see a new option that pops up that says drawing assist. Basically what that allows you to do is use your grid as a way to determine where your strokes lay down. Because we have a 2D grid, we're only going to be able to draw in the direction of the grid itself. So we're only going to be able to draw horizontally and vertically. So now we're going to go back to our color picker, and we're just going to add a little bit of variation into this floor. We're going to scumble in a new color. So we're just going to take our color picker and kind of drag it down a little darker, a little bit to the right, a little bit more saturation in the color. Go to our brushes here, and then we're actually just going to go to, let's do wet acrylic. Pretty decent size, opacity almost all the way up. Let's just go for there. And we're just going to start drawing in some color, just laying it in. As you can see, because you have assist on, anywhere you draw, you don't really have to worry about making a straight line because it's going to make a straight line for you. And we want these to go left to right or horizontal. So just kind of come in. You can play with the size, lay in some areas thicker, lay in some areas more opaque. Adjust your size here and there just to have a little bit of variation. And at this point, you can actually turn your drawing grid off so it's not a distraction, and your assist will actually stay on. So go back here and just turn the drawing guide off. That's just visually going to turn it off. But you can see if we go to layers, it's still assisted. So we're good there. Now we don't want to fill it all up. We want to have a little bit of variation here and there. So I think this is looking pretty good. If you think that one part got a little too heavy, you want to go back to that base color, you can just color pick and find that light color and just lay it back in on top. So I'm just going to come down here and kind of lay that light color back in a little bit. Alrighty, so now that we have this and we've laid in our secondary base color, this should still be on the same layer. So now we're going to smudge some of this out so it's not as hard. So go to our smudge tool. Once again, just hold down. You should be smudging with the same brush that you were painting with. Keep your opacity pretty low. Keep the smudge size of the brush pretty high. And just come in here and just quickly run your brush back and forth. Like I said, we don't want to lose all the definition. We just want to get rid of the very harsh lines. So I just swipe left and right very quickly. I like how that's looking. So now we're going to go to our layers menu, add a new layer on top and hit clipping mask. So we're going to clip that layer down to this base color here, or to this base floor. I'm going to do the same thing we did for the plank. So we're going to find a really dark color. I just drag my color picker pretty much down to a very dark umber. It's not completely black, but it's basically black. Come back to our brushes, go to dry brush here. I just want to turn my opacity pretty far up. Adjust our size here. And we're just going to lay in that really fine grain. Oh, I forgot. We want to turn our drawing assist back on this layer. So go back, tap on layer 10 here, and just hit drawing assist. Once it says assisted, you're good to go, and you can just literally just grain back and forth. Nice, nice. Okay, I like how this looks, so I'm going to continue to do the same thing. We're going to add another layer, turn on our clipping mask. We're going to go for a different brush this time, so let's go with our old brush, which is the one right above it. And then turn on assisted here, so tap, drawing assist, and then same exact thing. Just kind of making long strokes back and forth. And then layer 12 will be our color layer. So we're going to do the same thing we did earlier. You can come to your color picker and find a nice tone of some wood that you want to achieve. I'm going to go a little darker for this one, maybe somewhere down here. Yeah, let's go for that. So once you find your color, we're gonna go back to the wet acrylic brush and just make it larger now. And we're gonna start to lay in this color. I'm gonna introduce a new color in as well. So this will help you have a little bit of variation in the tone of your planks of wood. So you want to be quick with it, but so it doesn't look too contrived. Like, don't think too hard about it. Just kind of add the streaks in here and there. Once you're happy with how it's looking, we're going to go ahead and smudge this color out a little bit. So hold down on here. And then we're just going to smudge. Alrighty, so once you're happy with where you are, you should pretty much have covered all the grain we just did with color. So now that we have that, we're just going to change the blend mode on this color layer. So tap the N. You guessed it, you can go to multiply. You can go down here. I don't like that. Yeah, I don't like any of those. So just go to multiply. And then if this is like way too chocolatey brown for you, you can once again just reduce the opacity a little bit. Cool, so now that we're here, we're just gonna add some highlight and some more finer grain like we did on the plank before we start to define all the individual planks. So hit here, add a new layer, clip it, go to our color picker here and just take this color straight up to that peachy orange color that we used earlier. Take our brush to the dry brush option and then make sure our drawing assist is turned on. So tap here, just tap drawing assist. And we're just gonna lay this highlight back in with that dry brush. Turn the blend mode of that layer. We're gonna go to screen again, or yeah, we'll do screen. And we're just gonna bump it down a little bit in opacity. And right now the grain is looking a little too orange for me, so I'm just gonna adjust it using hue, saturation, brightness. So I'm just gonna come here, hue, saturation, brightness, and then we're just gonna bump the brightness up a little bit. Take down the saturation, that's gonna make it a little bit more gray. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so now we're gonna just turn our drawing grid back on. Go to your layers panel, add a new layer and clip it to the base. We're gonna go to our color picker and basically just drag it all the way down. We're gonna go for almost a pure black here. For our brush, we are going to go with, since we're just doing our lining at this point, we wanna keep the brush pretty generic. So I think I'm just gonna go to our monoline brush. So go to calligraphy and go to monoline here. That's already selected, so we're good. Decrease our size, pretty small. Opacity 100%. And now the grid is gonna help us make even plank marks basically with the drawing assist. So we're gonna make sure, once again, make sure that layer has drawing assist turned on. So tap it, hit drawing assist. We're good to go. I'm gonna zoom in here and then basically every inch on our canvas, we're just gonna make a horizontal line all the way across. So every inch, because we did 1/4 inch, is gonna be every 2 grid marks. So just count up from your bottom, go 1, 2, and just generally start in that position and just drag it straight across. It doesn't have to be exactly on the line. It probably won't be, and that's fine, but at least it's gonna be in the general area because we have the grid. So count up another 2. So 1, 2, put your pencil down and just drag it straight across. 1, 2, drag it across, and do one more. 1, 2. Oh, I don't like that. Drag it across. Now that we have 4 lines here, we're actually just going to duplicate these lines and drag them up to create the rest. I mean, you could count every two and just go that way, but this is a different way to also achieve the same thing. So we have our 4 lines on layer 14 here. Just swipe to the left, hit duplicate. It's gonna bring a new layer 14 on top. So go to your move tool, so tap the little arrow, and we're just gonna make sure we're on uniform and drag those layers up until we are at the new position, which is 2 grid marks above where we ended. So once again, you're just gonna drag it up until your last line, which you can't see, it's at the bottom of your selection here. Make sure your last line is 2 grid marks up from the last line that you created there. Once you have it, tap out, and now you've just duplicated those lines. We're gonna go to our layers panel here and pinch these 2 together. So pinch the 2 layers that you just duplicated together like this. And now we have double the grid marks by just duplicating the layer. So we're gonna duplicate it one more time. Swipe to the left, duplicate, move, and take all of these lines now and move them. Once again, we're gonna find our bottom line, make sure it's 2 grid marks up from where we just ended. So right there, and just place it. So now our entire floor has all of our horizontal plank marks going, so we're good there. Come back to our layers panel and just duplicate, make sure all our lines are on the same layer. So just not duplicate, but we're just gonna pinch them down and merge them. So if I turn layer 14 off here, I should have all of our lines on the one layer. I'm just gonna rename that. Alrighty, so now that we have our horizontal plank lines, we're gonna make some vertical plank lines. So go ahead and hit your plus. Clip it per usual. Tap on the layer, turn on drawing assist here. And we're gonna come in and make vertical marks. So I think we're gonna do these every 4 inches on here. So that would be every 8 marks. So we're gonna go 2, 4, 6, 8, draw a line, 2, 4, 6, 8, 2, 4, 6, 8. And then we're gonna offset the next row of lines a little bit. So we're gonna go 2 back from this one, just so they have a little bit of variation. So we see where we made this line, just go 1, 2 back and draw a vertical line. 1, 2, draw a vertical line. 1, 2, draw a vertical line. I think we're gonna stagger it maybe one more time. So maybe this time we go forward 1. So from the last mark we made, we're gonna go to the right 1 grid mark, which is here. And make sure that line comes all the way to the bottom. So from the last line, we're gonna go to the right 1. Last line to the right 1. Cool, and I like this pattern overall. I don't think we need to do any more. So now that we have our kind of 3 marks here, actually, no, I'm gonna do one more. I lied, sorry. So from this mark here, let's maybe go 3 to the left, maybe. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I like that. I think that introduces enough variation. So now that we kind of have our pattern of vertical lines here, once again, you could kind of start from here and repeat that same exact thing. But since we already have it on its own layer, we're just going to duplicate the layer and move it up. So go to your layer here, swipe to the left, hit duplicate, go to move. I'm just going to drag these vertical lines up, the duplicate. So make sure your snapping is turned on, because as you can see, this blue line is what's keeping me completely vertical. Make sure I'm not going off one way or the other. So once you have moved your vertical lines up to the planks that don't have vertical lines, just go ahead and drop it down. Turn your move tool off and just check everything. Make sure it looks good. Alrighty, and now that we've done that, go to your layers, We're gonna take that same layer that we just moved, swipe it to the left, hit duplicate, and move it one more time. Or we might have to do it 2 more times. So move it up to the planks that don't have lines anymore. Make sure you're lined up and drop it down. And we're going to duplicate it one more time because that one plank up there just doesn't have it. So we're going to swipe to the left, duplicate, and drag it up. Once again, make sure you're in line. So make sure those blue lines are snapping, and position it and then drop it down. Next. So now we have all of our planks. As you can see, these planks are a little short and stubby, but if you wanted them to be longer and thinner, you would just change the distance between the lines you made previously. So have fun with this step. After you've done it here, you can go back and alter it to make the planks look how you want them to look. So I am happy with all of this. So now we're going to merge all of our lines together. Go back to your layers panel. So you can see we already named horizontal plank lines, and then all these lines are duplicate lines. We haven't named them yet. There's no point in naming them now because we're just going to merge it all together. So tap on your horizontal plank lines, tap on that top 15, we're just going to pinch them together. So just pinch, and then always just double check to make sure you have everything on the layer, because say if you pinched too many together, you can always just double tap to go back, or tap with 2 fingers until you get everything expanded back out, and then you can make sure you have the right layer selected. So pinch, check to make sure it looks good. It does. We're good to go. And we're almost there, guys. So now you can see we have our dark plank lines, but we just want to take it to the next step and make it look a little bit more believable. So first we're going to turn our grid off. We don't need that anymore. So go to your wrench, turn off your guide. So we're going to duplicate this layer with the lines. So go ahead and swipe left on it, duplicate. Now we're going to take the one that's on the bottom, so select the one underneath. So that one, it should turn blue. We're going to go ahead and hit invert. So we're going to invert the color. Since these lines are black, we're going to make them white for now. So go ahead and just tap on that layer and hit invert. As you can see, we don't see nothing changed on our end because those lines are directly under the black lines. But what we're going to do is nudge it a little bit down and a little bit to the right. So we want this duplicate to sit a little bit under the lines that were already there. So before you go to your move tool, zoom in a little bit so you're up close and you can see what you're doing. Then hit move. And make sure you're on uniform. And we're just going to put our pencil down and drag it diagonally this way. So a little bit down, a little bit to the right. But you can just do it in one motion by just dragging your pen a little bit like that. You basically want to see these white lines sitting directly underneath and to the right of the black lines that we made earlier. Good. So now we don't want these lines to be stark white like this. So we're just going to change the color of them. So we're going to go to our layers here. Before we change the color, let's go ahead and rename the white layer of the plank lines. We're just going to rename it to highlight. Now to change the color, we're just going to turn on alpha lock. So tap on that layer, turn your alpha lock on, and we're going to turn off everything else. We don't need, or turn off the drawing assist, not everything else. So turn off your drawing assist here. Make sure alpha lock is on. We're going to come here and pick this peachy color that we did our highlights earlier with. We're going to pick that color and then just drag it to the left a little bit. We want it to be a little bit more towards white. Somewhere up in there. Great. So once you have your color, we're going to go back over to here and just use any kind of big brush to lay in that new color. So just go to like flat brush or something like that and take the size pretty far up, like pretty big. And we're just going to draw in the color. So as you can see, we're only coloring in on that white layer because we have alpha lock turned on. If you don't have alpha lock turned on, you might just end up scribbling color everywhere. So you want to make sure you don't do that. All right, now that we have that, go ahead and turn alpha lock off. So tap, turn alpha lock off. And we're going to blur this line out ever so slightly. So zoom in to one corner, doesn't matter where, just so you can see the highlight line. We're going to go to our adjustments panel here and go to Gaussian blur. So tap that. You should see this little menu pop up at the top here. We're just going to slide our Apple Pen to the right and just blur that line out a little bit, like ever so slightly. Like that, we don't want that. That's too far. So go back to 0 and just drag it maybe 1 or 2%. And then kind of zoom out too, just to check it. We don't want it to go blur too far because we don't want it to start to blur past the black line. Yeah, and then when you zoom out, you should see our planks. They look really good. Right now, the highlight is a little strong, so we can go here to our highlights layer and double tap, or tap with 2 fingers, and then slide your opacity down a little bit until it looks natural. So I would say somewhere in like 70% looks really good. That is pretty much it. You basically now have a wooden planked floor. And it's pretty simple. Like I said, you're just building up textures on top of a base, and then you're adding in your plank lines and then adding in some highlights to make those planks pop, and you're good to go. Now, if you want to go the extra mile in scenic design, often we have to like vignette our floors and stuff when they go off to the wings or to the side. So I can show you how we do that. It's a really nice touch, actually. So just one more time, we're gonna add one more layer. Turn on our clipping mask here. Pick the color, which is gonna go pretty much dark. So just drag your color picker down. Now we're gonna go with a soft brush. So go to airbrushing here, hit soft brush. Make your size fairly large, opacity about half. And we're gonna draw in a vignette. So we're gonna focus our attention off the canvas and start to draw in, so we can start to see that color hitting the corners here. Cool, I like that. So now that we have this, go to your adjustments, tap here, Gaussian blur, and make sure you're zoomed out. I'm just gonna drag and blur this out a little bit. I would say I like around 25. That looks pretty good. Yeah, that's nice. So now we've kind of vignetted the wood and kind of focused our attention towards the center. I'm gonna reduce the opacity on this layer just a little bit. Somewhere in there. Yeah. And I think we're gonna call this good. I really like how this looks, but as you can see, the possibilities are endless. It just depends on your base color and how you build up the textures on top of each other. This is a pretty generic wooden floor, but you can get very specific. You can start to add more distressing and paint peeling away and things like that on top of this base. So have fun with it. I hope you guys learned a thing or two about rendering wood and how you can take these skills and apply it to basically render any type of wood that you ever would want to create. It always helps to have a reference image if you don't know where to start to kind of mimic, and you can pull colors from your reference image as well. So I would recommend that you kind of go back after you've done this tutorial and pick a random reference piece and try to mimic that wood as well, kind of using these same techniques, and that'll just help you get more familiar with the process. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Please share this video with anybody who you think might benefit from seeing it. You can follow me on my social media down below. I will link all that good stuff down there, and I will see you guys in the next video. All right, see you later. Peace.